Yeah, so I'll go first. So, um, I originally started out actually in undergraduate research in the mathematics department. My specialization in BME at the time, which I never changed, it was biomechanics and biomaterials. But I always took a liking to the computational side of things, which that's something I developed that interest for as I continued doing research. I just happened to pick that one as my first type of research field, and I ended up liking it a lot. May not always be the case, but that just happened with me. So after going through with that, I transferred into a BME lab during my senior year, and that's where I'm still doing research now, actually, as a PhD student. And during undergraduate studies, I was also involved in AEMB myself. So I was actually the secretary of AEMB. That was a lot of fun. I worked with Yushen and Theo. That was a lot of fun. So that's a little bit about me. And going back to the actual model, or the lab, I should say, in BME, I continued on in Dr. Bluestein is a professor in BME. He does computational research as well. So I continued on in his lab. So that's my background and kind of my specialization, and kind of why I chose that track.
Great, thank you. Yushan, Theo, Jack, feel free to jump in.
Okay, I can be the next one. Yeah, so during my undergrad, as Kyle mentioned, we work on A and B together. It was a fun time. Yeah. And like for my research experience, first specialization, I was doing cellular and molecular, biomedical. But at that time, actually, like I'm doing some research with Dr. Chen with some like IoT stuff, which means like sensors and like health data collection type of thing. Then I got into like coding stuff I'm pretty interested in. Then later I tried some, what's it called? Proteomic analysis with her, doing some math. So I feel like I really love doing such type of thing. And recently I'm interested in like doing like complex system modeling. That's why I started like doing my PhD with Dr. Brody about like brain circuit stuff. So yeah, that's basically my background.
So I guess I will go next. So I actually started off being on the pre-med track on my undergrad years in Stony Brook. So I was like all the other pre-med students taking all the requirement classes such as general chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry. And then I realized that it's not really the path for me. But during the first 2 years when I was still in the pre-med track, I was trying to be really involved on campus with different organizations. I was volunteering with SBCSER. I'm not sure if you guys heard of it, but it's basically like a campus emergency response team. I really love that because I've made a lot of friends from joining the organization. And I also learned a lot, and then we get to explore around campus a lot through going on different activations on campus for events. So after being a pre-med track, I still stay in the organization because I already made my friends there. So I still stay in there, but at the same time, I was also doing research, and I used to be in Dr. Wei Yin's lab in the BME department. Because her researches in platelets are really interesting to me. And so I was in her lab for 2 years until COVID hits. And then the undergrad students were not allowed to be in the BME department. So from that moment on, I was trying to look around for research opportunities that I could just do online virtually. And I approached Dr. Frang because her lab is also doing blood flow, which is something that I'm interested in. So I reached out to her, and I'm glad because her lab, we were able to do a lot of analysis online virtually, just through computers. So that was the plan for during the COVID. I mean, even though we're back on campus now in 2022, a lot of our work is still computational, in which we're just done on our laptops, and we have our weekly meetings for research and things like that. And at the same time, I was also the vice president for AAMB, and it's my pleasure to work with Theo and Kyle during the time there. And then I was able to meet a lot of really, really nice people in the BME department, to be honest, because on SBC, sir, I was able to meet people outside from my department, but I'm definitely not familiar with the people within the department. I'm so glad to be able to work around people from the same background, and we could struggle together with the courses and everything. Yeah. Yeah, so that's basically my background. Yeah.
Okay. Hi again, everyone. Much like Yuxuan, I also started out as pre-med, pretty much up until first semester junior year when I took biochem. And that pretty much just was a good selling point for me to not stay on the pre-med track. And so that summer, actually, I joined the first lab that I ever worked in, which was a synthetic biology lab in the city at Columbia. And so I did that sort of research for about a year and a half, 2 summers, and then sort of intermittently throughout the year when I was able to commute in. As far as other extracurriculars during undergrad, I'm actually probably the only person here who was not part of AEMB. But I did do the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences peer mentoring program, and I tutored on the side, which is pretty much where all of my other spare time went, was just to sort of help pay my way through college. And then I graduated in 2019, and I applied to the master's program at Columbia, mainly just because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was applying to PhD programs and master's programs and some industry jobs and startups and that kind of thing, just casting a super wide net to literally every single possible place that would allow me to send an application. And I sort of just settled on Columbia, and I knew that I wanted to stay in New York, and I knew that Columbia was a really good program, and I just wanted to go there and kind of feel it out, just to figure out if continuing on with my schooling in a PhD would be the right choice for me versus earning my master's degree and then reapplying for industry jobs. So when I first got to Columbia, I also tried to cast a little bit of a wide net. So I applied to volunteer in the lab that I'm actually currently in for my PhD. So I started that pretty early on. And I also applied to work at a startup. And so my first semester at Columbia, I focused mainly on the lab. And then my second semester at Columbia, I focused mainly on the startup. And so if you're following the timeline, that second semester was the COVID semester. So that wasn't great for my classes, but the startup focused on low cost point of care PCR. So we actually ramped up from like 3 of us at the beginning of the startup to I think it's probably like 20 people now. Doing a whole lot of work on developing rapid low-cost point-of-care PCR for COVID applications. I don't think you can actually use the technology yet. I don't know if it's been approved for human use, but that sort of showed me what the industry side was. And so that semester, I decided that I really enjoyed the research I was doing, which is focused mainly on orthopedics. And so I decided to speak to my advisor about his recommendations for applying to similar labs. And he offered me a position to stay. He's like, pretty much, you're a great fit here. We get along really well. And if you're interested in the PhD program, you're already well integrated into the lab. We'd love to have you stay on. And so that's sort of how I got into the PhD program at Columbia. And so I've pretty much been there ever since. That's also sort of why I'm kind of in between second and third year in terms of my degree progression. I did that first semester in fall 2019, and then kind of something in the spring semester when everything went pass fail. And now I just passed my qualifying exam. So I'm officially in the program, but a little bit ahead of everyone else in my cohort.
Awesome. Thank you all for providing some insight into your backgrounds. Now, shifting to life post-undergrad, what does a typical day in graduate school look like? Do you feel that you have more free time and flexibility among your course load, research, and extracurricular activities than an undergrad? With regards to your current program, do you think it would be possible to work a part-time job alongside the commitment of attending grad school?
I can start this off since I went last time. So I actually, perfect to your last point, when I first joined the master's program, Columbia does not really offer scholarships for master's students, and I didn't apply for any of the NSF things. So when I made the commitment to come to Columbia, I was making a financial commitment. And so I was also working a full-time job on top of the classes. So it is possible to do it during the master's program, not during the PhD. It's possible during the master's program because you can structure your classes in a way that would allow you to have certain days completely off, and so you can work a part-time job on the side. I will say though, if you look at my GPA that semester when I was working at a part-time job, even though taking into account it was my first semester of grad school, it took a hit. And so there's, I think, a little bit of a trade-off in terms of working and trying to pay your way through school during school versus focusing entirely on classes. And so for me, because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, I just wanted to do as much as possible. And that came a little bit at the expense of my grades. But it ended up working out okay, just because in terms of the PhD, all I need to do is maintain a 3.2. And so my grades never dipped below that. So that's good. And then if I was thinking about applying to industry jobs, the advisors at Columbia pretty much gave me the vibe that as long as I had strong letters of recommendation, I was able to show that I was a capable individual, that the difference between a 3.2 and a 3.5 during that first semester wouldn't necessarily be the biggest difference. So a little bit of a trade-off there, personally. And then that was during the master's. And so during the PhD, it's extremely flexible. So I make my own hours, which is good and bad. It's bad if you're disorganized like myself, because every once in a while you'll just wake up in a cold sweat at 3 in the morning and realize that you should have done something before you left lab, or that you actually have to go in and take care of something. That's only happened twice, but you are able to fully make your own schedule. And then the way that Columbia does classes is that you don't have to take them all at once. They strongly advise you to finish the master's component in your first 2 years, and then another 10 classes over the following 3 years of the PhD. But that's a loose outline. You can take all of your classes in the first 2 years and just load up on credits, and then do only research towards the end. You can spread it out. This is not recommended, but you could do all research your first couple of years and then do all of your classes towards the end. But it's very flexible and completely up to you, and especially your advisor, in terms of your timeline. And if you're thinking about publishing, then that also sort of comes into consideration as well.
Okay, so I guess I'll go next. In terms of flexibility, I do think, I don't know, maybe it's because of COVID, but I did not feel like my schedules are being overwhelming due to researches, because as I mentioned before, a lot of my research, I was able to do it individually on my own and virtually. So that was the easy that made my scheduling really much easier. And because of COVID, a lot of classes were online, so there wasn't much need for me to actually have to schedule my everyday schedules into incorporating classes and then the labs, because I could just do everything online virtually at my own free time. So there's no like, oh, I have to be in the lab at 8 and then be out by 5. There's nothing like that. So my scheduling was much more flexible. This semester, after returning back to the campus, well, a lot of my research is also virtual, so that wasn't much change for me. If anything, I did find a part-time job on campus. I'm working currently for the WISE department, Women's Science and Engineering. So that's another part-time that I found on campus. There's not much scheduling conflict, mainly because a lot of my research were computational and I was able to do them online. But there's definitely a lot more planning that has to be going on. So that's basically what I think about it. I think it's definitely doable, and I do agree with Jack. If you want to work on a full time and then you have in-person labs in which you have probably wet labs that you have to plan out, it'll be much more difficult. It's doable, but you also have to consider that there's a lot of planning that needs to be done ahead of time. And if you're not a planning type of person, you might experience some difficulties.
I think I can also comment on some of the class loading, like, for me in particular, just going from, say, the fall semester to the spring semester, I felt that it was a complete change of how I felt, in terms of having free time and where my time was being allocated to a lot. Because depending on really like the class load that you have, so in my case, being a first year PhD student, I would have to take 12 credits for the fall and spring semester. But going into, say, my second year, next fall and spring, I would only have to take 9 based on how the graduate, breakdown is, where you are in your progression. So, and going back to this year, I had to take, I was trying to take a lot of classes that were, somewhere out of my major, somewhere in the mechanical engineering field, somewhere in BME. And so last fall, I felt that I basically had like no free time. I was working, and the classes I was taking were pretty difficult. I was still trying to keep up with lab stuff and this and that. But now turn to the spring. Now the classes I'm taking are all in BME. -1 is actually I'm doing a finance course actually to do one of the credits that I have to eventually do throughout my progression. But going to this spring, it's been a complete 180, because now I feel that because of the requirements from my courses, even in grad school, it's so much different than what it was in the fall, that I am able to excel more in my research. I have more time to go do things after work. I'm not focused on, even just submitting assignments every week. So it does depend really upon the schedule and the amount of classes you are supposed to be taking, in my opinion. I think everyone else that's spoken to has done a really good job of explaining, other time allocation and stuff like that. But I would say when it comes to courses, it does really depend on where you are in your graduate school progression, and also what you're choosing to take, because that's going to dictate, again, how much time you have to spend in your research in this. So it's good to map it out and organize it. So
I do agree of all 3 of you saying. So first, like Kyle, to me, like, it feels like, since I also take a lot of classes outside BME, and like the workload is quite different. Last semester I took a CS course, and it's basically like a project every 2 weeks, and that workload is like crazy. And currently I'm taking some bioinformatics courses, which is fine. But yeah, it all depends on like what you choose. But yeah, at least I feel like now I have more flexibilities in terms of like choosing what class I want to take, and also like some interesting like topics that will be taught like in the graduate level classes, because they go into more like, they become more specialized than like undergraduate courses. So they are like really interesting to me. And like, as Yushan said, like, she's doing computational, I'm doing computational as well. So there's a lot of flexibility. So I do all my projects in my computer. So yeah, just like I can have more control over my schedule, which is good. Yeah, and yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. So my next question is, what led you to specifically pursue higher education in BME? And how did you choose between a master's or a PhD if that's something that you were torn between?
Should I go first? Because
If you want to, you can. Yeah.
Because recently I just made the decision
Right.
to transfer from a master to PhD. So my consideration, before I pursue the PhD, I do the master all because I can get a higher salary, even if like for an entry level job, compared to a bachelor. And I'm specifically looking for like an informatic type of job. And there are two reasons why I'm doing PhD right now. The first thing is I'm really, really interested in the research topic my lab is doing. That's the first thing. So I'm enthusiastic and like really highly motivated by the stuff. So that's why I want to do the time investment on it. The second one is it do benefit my career path. So eventually I want to go to industry. I don't want to stay in the academia. Yes, because like more money, hopefully. But yeah, and I do find out like doing like what my lab is doing about like system dynamic and all the method analysis. It really helped with my how to say, like help with my preparation for bioinformatic jobs. And I feel like the salary is like much more higher if I finish the PhD. But like, and if someone are thinking about PhD, one thing to consider is like it does not always be the case that you come out with the PhD, you will get a higher salary. That's one key thing to look at, because as you know, it's more about like what you are studying instead of like what your degree is. Because you know, like bachelor software engineering can earn more than like maybe a master by BME student. So yeah, it's more about the field. So think about it. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Yeah, I also think going along with that, a big part of my decision was just the timing of things in terms of, when I was graduating, what opportunities were available, did it make sense financially? All these things you kind of have to consider because, it could be, it seems like a great position, when I applied for grad school and this and that. But, when it comes down to it, grad school is expensive. It's not, it's very taxing in terms of, the fiscal responsibility. Just aside from being able to, again, maybe have a higher salary at the end of the day when you're done with it after your 5 years. But I think, a big part of why I was able to do it and pursue a PhD was because I was able to, fortunately, apply to scholarships and be able to get funded through it. Because a lot of the time, when I was thinking about doing it or doing graduate school when I was a junior or even a sophomore, I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't know if it makes sense for me to do that. Maybe I'll just be better off going right into industry after my bachelor's. But you know what? Sometimes the timing is good and things make sense to do. And you know what? Going along with that, another reason why I did it, not just for that, another reason why I wanted to do my PhD was because I'm kind of torn between whether I do want to go to industry or whether I want to stay in academia. Because if you're going to stay in academia, and you want to be a professor, you want to have a research group, whatever you might want to do, you need, a PhD. And so we had, to be established in the research field, all these things considered. So that was also another driving factor and why I chose to pursue a PhD. And, surely, as Theo had said as well, the way you get incorporated into the workforce, whether you're in academia or in industry, you kind of get, I would say, put up a little bit higher on the totem pole because now, again, you've done 5 extra years of school, you have specializations in your research field. Maybe you're pretty well established in the research world, papers, all these other things. So these are all kind of the components that I would think about when you're trying to, or you're going to apply to grad school, because there's other commitments there, both financially and of your own time that you just got to consider and make sure you're in it for the long haul. But yeah.
Yeah, so making a decision between a master's and PhD, I think a part of it, it's also really depends on if you're someone who's research oriented, or if you're someone who just wants to go to the industry as soon as possible. I know that you're probably able to find job opportunities even though as bachelors, but at the same time, I was hearing from a lot of my other friends or from my advisors saying that a graduate degrees will guarantee a better position. Not guarantee, but hopefully you have a lot more openings or opportunities that you could probably look for when you graduate with a graduate degree. So that's one of the reasons why I want to pursue with a 5-year master's program, because it's basically 1 extra year and you're able to get a lot out of it. I think it's both, it's like in terms of time or in terms of financial aspects of the decision making. I think the 5-year master's program makes a much more sense for me, because I know that I'm not a research oriented person myself from these many years of my undergrad studies. So I just want to get a graduate degree and then hopefully get a job in the industry as soon as possible. And I definitely am not the type of person to look for continuing this path in academia. So I think a major part is that you have to ask yourself, what do you actually want? Where do you see yourself in like 5 years and 10 years, and then make your decisions based off that.
Yeah, so I think I'm sort of in the same boat as Teddy here, or Theo, I'm sorry, where I started in the master's program and then switched into the PhD. And so doing just not a 5-year master's, just separately applying to a completely different master's program is a significant financial commitment. I think the exact cost of the master's program that I got into and went to without housing was like $35,000 or something. And so for me, that was a price that was worth paying to figure out what I wanted to do after undergrad, because I really wasn't sure, mainly because I knew where I wanted to be, at least location wise. But I think if you know that you want to do graduate school, for sure, without a doubt, then I think applying directly to PhD programs is worthwhile, because you don't have to bear the burden of paying for the master's. You'll earn your master's degree on your way to your PhD. And then if you decide after you've earned that master's, and this is kind of frowned upon by certain departments, but you can always master's out and sort of leave after the second year of your PhD with an MS, having no financial burden from the graduate school program. But that's only if you know for sure that you want to do graduate school, and then just sort of halfway through the PhD, you realize that it's not for you. But I think the PhD was the right choice for me, because I really love doing research and I really love teaching. And so throughout undergrad, I worked as a mathematics tutor. And so even though I probably wouldn't be teaching math in the future, I think being a professor sounds like a really cool job. And I always want to be involved in research and teaching. And so those two things kind of go hand in hand. And so having a PhD is an absolute necessity for that. On top of that, I think that the research that I'm doing right now is really cool. It's not something that I saw myself doing in undergrad, and wasn't even the research that I wanted to do in undergrad. But once I got into it, I fell in love with it. And so it's working out really well for me. And certain times it's like a sort of love-hate relationship. When things work, it's great. If you run into a roadblock or something, and then you're sort of like going back and forth with your advisor or other people, it can be kind of tough. But I think all good things are worth working for. And so the PhD is definitely something that I really wanted to do, and taking the time and making the financial commitment to do the master's program separately from the PhD ended up being the right choice for me, because it got me to the point where I am now, that I know that the PhD is absolutely the right call.
All right, great. So for this next question, I believe you all touched on this a little bit, but what types of experiences did you guys have during your undergraduate years that helped you attain admission into graduate school? So this can go beyond research. You can talk about any internships or leadership positions you had, or even part-time jobs.
So I'll go first again. So for the PhD specifically, and because I went in as a master's student that was already pretty research oriented, I know for a fact that the research experience that I had in undergrad, the year and a half that I did doing the synthetic biology research, even though it wasn't directly relevant to the field that I ended up working in, was probably what gave my resume the biggest boost. Mainly just because the letter of recommendation that I got from that research professor went a long way to the current research professor that I work for. On top of that, I think being involved in conferences or presenting work, no matter how big or small in the scope of whatever field you're working in, I think is really important. It shows that you are dedicated to whatever you're doing, and that you're also successful, even if it's not like Nobel Prize winning data. If you're able to make a poster out of it, it really goes a long way and adds a couple extra lines to the end of your CV. And then I think also being now on the other side of the recruiting process, specifically for PhD programs, I can say that, and it's like not, it's a little bit selfish, I think, of the professors, but from their standpoint, a student who is applying who has like an NSF fellowship or something similar, where their first year is funded, is already a way more attractive candidate than someone who's coming from some giant award-winning lab or something like that, just because from the perspective of the advisor, their work, the students' work, the prospective students' work has already been validated by a third party and has been funded. So for them, it's free, high quality labor that they're getting for that first year guaranteed. And then also, especially from an academic perspective, I think that the way that students were sort of selected was firstly whether or not they were funded, and then secondly whether or not they had a competitive GPA. So I think for us, it was pretty much like, if you're above a 3.5, then you're like towards the top end. If you're below a 3.5, then you'll get looked at second, and then it'll go to your letters of recommendation and that kind of thing, to figure out whether or not you're going to be a good fit for the lab. So I think focusing on getting, especially if you're going into a research field, spending time and doing as best quality research as you possibly can as an undergrad, and being as involved in that as possible, and then also maintaining competitive grades throughout the entire process. And then finally, I think it's important that you show that you have some personality. So doing stuff that's fun to you, that's interesting to you, that makes you happy in whichever way that is. Physically, if you like to play sports, or mentally, if you like to do like debate team or something like that, or like for me, emotionally, like I really like to play Frisbee. That's like my my thing, and that sort of helps get me out of my head and more into my body and into myself. And so that, I think, also helps you stand out as a candidate, as a real human being, than just some robot that has a 3.8.
Yeah, I think all of that is exactly what I would have said. And just to kind of tailor myself into all of those types of situations, like what I would put on, say, my grad school application, when I did put on my application was, like I mentioned before, doing previous research in even, a different field, which still applied to what I was doing and what I currently am doing now, in terms of computational research. And I was with them again with the mathematics department at Stony Brook, being able to show that, again, I was able to be in some type of leadership role. So being, say, the secretary of AEMB, for example, and being on a few other kind of boards or committees in the math department too. I was still kind of keeping up with that at the time throughout my junior year. I mentioned that in my application. I was involved with the Stony Brook club baseball team. That's something I like to do. And, that's how I was able to, enjoy the time away from doing my research and doing classes and stuff. And, helps you take a step back and, just kind of be with yourself, as Jack had said, and kind of, de-stress and things like that. So I think all those things, again, are critical. And again, that was some of my personal experiences and some of the things I had done throughout my undergraduate years to then apply to grad school.
Yeah, I definitely agree to what Jack and Kyle has been talking about. Definitely try to look for different type of activities for to do on campus. So that really shows the person that the interviewers of what type of person that you're just not someone who's studying hard in classrooms, but you're also someone who likes to explore around. You're someone with a personality. I think that's what's really important. So there's a lot of things that interviewers actually look for when interviewing you, just not only focusing on your academic, but also on what type of person you are, your personalities. Are you someone who's able to have a good work ethic? And there's a lot of things that one considers. So having a good GPA will help you a lot, and needless to say, but having all sorts of diversity of all the activities that you have done or responsibilities that you have committed to when you're on campus also shows that you are a great team player, or a good person to be recruited for the department, because they definitely do not want someone who is just 100% on studying and knows nothing else.
Unfortunately, I don't have that much extra curriculum to share. The only interest of mine is just workout, so there's nothing that I can put on the CV, but I can actually share my research experience. So I feel like during my undergrad, I actually didn't know like what field I'm interested in. Actually, I'm interested in like too many things. So I have done like computational biology. I have done optogenetic research. I've done like health monitoring research, as well as proteomic, as mentioned. But yeah, but like actually, like even though like all these topic as you hear, they don't line up with each other, but like magically right now, like doing my current research, they line up. Like all the skill I have learned from those past experience, they can all be used in my research right now, which is kind of like, I don't know how it happens. It sounds like too magical to me, but it's something like, what I want to say is like, maybe try a lot of things that you're interested in, then like eventually they have their own values. Like they will be used in some places. Yeah.
All right, great. So this next question is somewhat related. Again, this was also touched on a little bit before, but what are your post-graduation plans? So if industry is the route you're choosing, what type of sector are you planning to pursue a career in, whether that's medical devices, biopharma, bioinformatics, and why? And same thing if your plan is to go into academia.
Let me go first then. As mentioned, I want to do bioinformatics. So it's more like coding plus math plus biology. Yeah, yeah, I want to go to industry. Yeah, and actually, can you remind me the second half of the question?
Just which sector and if you have a particular reason for why.
Oh, yeah. The reason is just I really love to do data-driven jobs, like to look at things that you cannot see with your bare eyes. Like you want to see something that is valid, but it's not like really like how to say, like you couldn't find like easily. That's the fun of it. For me, yeah.
Yeah, I think for myself, I'm kind of split between whether I want to do industry or academia. And there's not like any, set time right now where I need to decide, like this second. And the reason for that is because, the reason why I'm not really sure right now, I'm kind of 50-50 on it, is because, after going through my first year now in grad school, it seems like, because I've been serving as a teaching assistant and being able to collaborate with professors and, throughout my undergraduate, career, obviously, being in the presence of professors and getting, taught from them. I feel like I feel like I could definitely bring to the table a really good experience for students if I was a professor. So I think I've learned what improvements could be made to the teaching, the types of teaching that I've seen and experienced myself. So I feel like I would try to improve that type of education and the experience in college while also, doing something that I'm really interested in. So, BME, and in particular, I really like doing medical devices and developing and testing prosthetics. And that's, that's exactly what I do in my current, role in my research group. And so for that same reason, now I'm not sure, if I like doing the research and development side of things, do I maybe want to do industry and work in say, a well-established prosthetics company such as, Medtronic, who does heart valves, or someone like that. So that's the thing right now. Those are my two, reasons why I would go for, either or. And I'm not really sure right now. So I think it's kind of good to keep the options open until, it's time to make a decision. But yeah.
Yeah, similar to Kyle. My interest in maybe if I am pursuing a job in the industry is that probably some sort of biomechanics devices company. So my current research has to do with red blood cells and red blood cell flows properties. So if possible, I would like to be in a team where we get to research and develop devices uses my knowledge in this field, hopefully. But yeah, I'm still in the process of searching for the right position for myself.
Yeah, so I also kind of touched on this earlier. I'm like 95% sure that I'd want to go into academia just because I really love the field of BME. And so even if the research that I would be doing isn't necessarily in the field that I'm currently in, I think BME is still pretty general. And I think I've been able to develop and hopefully will continue to develop a pretty wide range of skills that could be just applied to anywhere in BME. And so I think as long as I'm able to stay on the forefront of research and do a little bit of teaching as well, then I would be satisfied. And I think the only thing that would probably pull me away from academia into industry is just, for full transparency, just a really big paycheck. And then at that point, I don't really think it would matter what I would be doing. It would just have to be like a lot of zeros on that paycheck, and then I'll just do whatever it is. But that's very, very unlikely to happen. Just because I think I love doing research so much, and I really like the environment of academia. And I think it fits really well with my personality socially and also my personality academically. So staying there, teaching, and hopefully starting a cool research lab.
Okay, so for the next question, Jack, you spoke about this with Columbia, but I guess on the Stony Brook side, are there any types of scholarships or fellowships that students can apply for to get financial assistance for a master's or a PhD?
Yeah, so I think the most well-known one would just be the NSF GRFP. I don't know the exact acronyms, but it's something along those lines where students graduating from undergrad or students finishing up their first year in a master's program or PhD can apply for essentially a full year of funding. So I think it's roughly $50,000. And so I think that just requires like 3 letters of recommendation, a statement of purpose about BME, or, I mean, for us, I'm assuming it would be BME, but just in case you want to do something completely different, engineering or science related, broadly STEM, and how the fellowship would allow you to pursue that. And so I think that they're aware that it's fully financially. There's like a little bit of merit that goes along with it, but it's mainly there to help students who can't necessarily afford to otherwise pursue graduate school. And so I think that's the biggest one. I think most universities will have like fellowships or scholarships through the department, or maybe just even the College of Engineering, that are less money, but still like, I think roughly equivalent to like a summer stipend. So they'll help with like rent or food or something like that for a month or so. And those are all specific to, I think, the school that you go to. And then there's, I think, some through just random organizations. So my partner's actually in medical school right now. And so she found out that through there's like a Hellenic organization or something like that, that offers money to medical students, should they apply to it. And so that has nothing to do with academics. That's fully based on her cultural heritage. So looking into stuff like that might be interesting, and you probably have a pretty good chance at getting those because they're a little bit less well known. But I would say start with looking into what the government has, because those will be the most well known and also the most well funded. And then whatever the school or department has. And then finally, if there's something cool that you do on the side, or some part of your culture or heritage that has some sort of large governing organization, there's a pretty good chance that they'll have some type of scholarship or fellowship that you can apply to, just to have some, like even $1,000 will go a really long way as far as your loans go, if you're going that route, or even just having a slightly nicer meal once a night for a month. So,
and also, yeah, those are all great points. And 2 things I would just like to add on quickly to that is, if you're unsure of maybe scholarships within your department, or maybe there's things out there that you're not sure of, or you want like more awareness of them in terms of funding, I think it's a great idea to contact your graduate program director, that wherever you're intending to apply to. I think it's a good idea to maybe get in contact with them and say, this is the situation. I would love to be part of the program. What other opportunities are there? Is there someone I can get in contact with in terms of funding? Maybe there's someone that directs that, whatever school it may be. So I don't think it hurts to reach out to those people, especially if you're a great student and maybe they're in need of maybe their enrollment is low in certain years of graduate school. They're looking for people. You never know the situation, and sometimes the timing can be right for you and for them. So I don't think it hurts to reach out to them if you're interested. And also going on along with the funding, and to the previous question too of why I was doing a PhD instead of a master's, it's very I think tough to find funding for a master's student in compared to a PhD, because I was actually part of the 5-year program, which then I transferred into the PhD program at Stony Brook. I think similar to what Theo was explaining. And what I was learning about, at the time of the master's is that, getting funding for that year, in terms of a 5-year master's would be really tough to do. And again, just 1 year of graduate school adds up. So that's the thing, to consider as well, is the discrepancy in the pricing, between master's, PhD, and the funding available for either a master's or PhD. Definitely keep that in mind. So.
Yeah, so from my personal experience, even for my master, I do remember there in SBU, the website, I think there's a website that's dedicated to graduate student scholarships. I think all these, if I remember it correctly, a lot of these applications opens up in October. And then I think the deadlines is somewhere in February or in March in the spring. So I was applying through those links, through those applications. I was applying for every one of them, and I was like, why not? If I was accepted, I get like extra bucks, so why not? So thankfully, I was able to receive one of the scholarships. One of my applications was being accepted. So I mean, it's not a lot of money, to be honest, in comparison to all the fundings from the PhD program, but it's definitely something that helped me to have a good dinner once in a while, or just like splurge a little, or just like basically pay for the basic everyday livings or groceries, since I'm living off campus on myself. It is a good opportunity. It definitely does not hurt if you have time, if you spend some time to apply for these scholarships, because I mean, you don't have to pay to send an application, but if you get in by any chance, you do get some amount of money back from these scholarships. So it's nice. It's definitely doable for master's students as well, because I've actually received it. So don't be discouraged, and yeah, just try your best and look for scholarship opportunities. Not even in Stony Brook, but I'm pretty sure there are. If you search online, there will be a few other applications available for scholarships, even for master students too. Yeah.
For me, I don't actually have too much to share about the scholarship because I'm international, so I'm not eligible for most of them. So, yeah.
All right, thank you all. So the final question that we have for you all is, do you have any advice on what to look for in a program or a school when applying to or choosing a graduate school to attend?
So, left from my opinion, I feel like my first priority is my interest. The second one is about my career path. The key thing is that when you are doing a PhD or master, like undergrad, you are learning like a lot of like different aspect of things. You are learning like a lot of like different skills in different fields of application. But like for graduate school, it's more like you are specializing in one single area that you won't be learning like too many things. So unless you are planning to like pursue a career in the specific field you are looking for, or you have interest in like doing research on the field, then you should go for it. But like other than that, it might not end up like helping your career path if you're going to industry. So you should think about that. Yeah. Yeah, that's the two things I mainly consider.
I think also going along with that, the program itself, seeing that, making sure there's like a nice versatility, say in the research they're doing. They have, pretty well established professors, people that have good track records. I think that's great. Seeing maybe lab web pages to see the inclusivity, the different types of environments that they're fostering, and how the students seem to interact with those PIs, and reaching out to those people. If you're interested in a lab, then they have a website. Usually it doesn't hurt to, again, reach out to people. I think that's the best thing you can do, is just to express your interest, because I think that goes a long way. And one of the biggest things is making sure that, if you have a program of interest, that the lab of interest for, conducting research in, say, biomedical engineering, making sure that there's funding available, because a large part of your success, I would say, in research, if you're pursuing, say, PhD in research, is making sure that that type of burden is kind of lifted from you. So if you have a PI that can fund you throughout your 5 years, it's just really nice, and really just relieving to be able to focus on your work right in the research lab, instead of having to, if you say you don't have funding, maybe in the lab, you maybe have to work a separate position. I know at Stony Brook, that's how it would work. If you don't have funding from the lab, you'd have to work as a TA usually. And that takes time away from your research, and it could be very time consuming, and a big role to fill. So I think that's a big thing to consider as well, when it comes to choosing the department, and also the actual PI and lab. So
Yes, I do agree to what Kyle and Theo has been mentioning in their explanations. I do think that finding the advisor is really important. The advisor that has a similar goal as you, the advisor that has a really clicking personality that you want to work with, that's someone that has a that's someone who's willing to help you and provide you with all the experiences that you wanted, that you including the lab experiences, the lab opportunities, and someone who's able to give a lot of help in your research experiences. I think that's another really important aspect when you're looking for advisors in your graduate programs. In addition, I would like to add on is also the location and the cost of living expenses of the program that you're looking to, because while research and your career path is a really important aspect to consider, you also have to consider that once you're dedicated to a PhD program, you're going to be living in the area for at least 3-4 years of your life. So you do not want to go to a place that you didn't do much research about and then be completely amazed about this environment that you're putting yourself into, and then find yourself in a really awkward position in which you love the research that they're doing, but just the entire environment or the location that the school is at is not what you would desire to. You often have to find like a midpoint between the research that you want to do and then the location or the living expenses, because as an adult, we have to be responsible for a lot of our everyday living expenses. So I think that's another important aspect when you're considering which school to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. I think everyone pretty much summed that up really well. I'll just say for me personally, I think the priorities were a little bit different. So as I mentioned, my number one priority wasn't necessarily the research. It was the place. I knew that that's where I wanted to be. And I think Stony Brook did a really good job of preparing me to succeed regardless of what I was going to do. And I just knew that I wanted to be in New York. And if I was going to be in New York, then I really wanted to go to Columbia. And then I got there, and then I applied to a bunch of different labs, and I didn't necessarily most of them checked the boxes on stuff I was interested in or had experience in, or that I knew that I was good at, or it had something that I wanted to learn. But it was mainly culture fit, which I think Kyle touched on as well, because you are going to be spending, as Yushan mentioned, like 5 years almost every single day with these people and interacting with them a lot. So making sure that academically you're compatible, but also socially you're compatible. Otherwise it can get kind of messy. And then I think as long as you're happy in those other two spaces, positive research will form on its own, because you'll have fostered a really good and healthy environment for yourself. And I think knowing your advisor's priorities early on is good, because if you have a very open and honest communication with your advisor, even if it's not necessarily the main focus of the lab when you first join it, most advisors in my experience have been pretty open to expanding the scope of their research. If it's something that interests you personally, or something that you want to learn, or if it's something that you want to help pioneer in the field, they will absolutely be there and support you for that. But that only comes from having the right fit for yourself in terms of location and culture and all that sort of stuff. So that's my spin on it. But I think also you're going to be doing research, so you have to make sure that it's good research and stuff that you actually enjoy doing.
Okay, well, those were all the questions that me and Purva had. Thank you guys for your thoughtful and insightful answers. We'll open the floor to those who are here. If they have any questions for the panelists, you can go ahead and ask.
Hi, so I'm Harry. I was just wondering if you think your current stipend is like enough for you to live comfortably.
Yeah, so I'm currently in the graduate student housing that Columbia offers. And so the way that our stipend is structured, at least in biomedical engineering, because every department is different, especially outside of STEM, it's designed around paying rent for this apartment, which has all utilities included in it. And then on top of that, they assume that you're going to be like obviously feeding and clothing yourself, and then like I think going out like once or twice a week. So I'm not like I don't go out, so I have a little extra walking around money. So it's difficult to have like savings and contribute to like retirement and that kind of thing. But if I need something, I can pay for it and I can afford it. I don't have to like budget my year around like $100 dinner. If I want to do that, it's something that the stipend allows me to do. And so that also changes based on inflation, because we have a graduate student union that's helped to fight for that. And so the rent increases with inflation every year. So our stipend also increases accordingly, because it's structured around how like the rent and cost of living is calculated in New York City. If you don't live in the graduate student housing, it gets a little bit dicier because you are on a pretty strict budget. And for me, at least, Columbia itself is an okay area. The immediately surrounding area is either extremely expensive if you're on the Upper West Side, or not super safe if you're leaving lab at like 2 or 3 in the morning like I am. So if you're not in the graduate student housing, you probably have to live in like Queens or Brooklyn, and then you have to commute. So there's a bunch of different things, but what's nice is I think for most programs is that they'll structure the stipend around the expected cost of living if you're in the graduate housing, and then everything else based on that is sort of dependent on your advisor or the department or the college that you're in. So.
I mean, as for me, in addition to the scholarship that I received from Stony Brook, I'm also working a part-time job, and I do believe, and in addition to that, I think I'm receiving some stipends from my research. So, I think I'm able to live comfortably with whatever I was provided with for now. Yeah, I don't have much problems.
Yeah, and I would also just comment on it too, because I mean, I still, being that I only live about 30 minutes away from Stony Brook, I've commuted my entire life. So being able to again still, I'm still living in the house I grew up in, which is great. And getting the stipend and not having to pay for rent. Obviously I can live fine, so it's kind of hard for me to answer this question. But if that is your situation, it makes perfect sense to do it. So it goes back to the location aspect of choosing school. So
Yeah, same. I haven't started receiving stipend yet, so I don't know like how it will go. Yeah.
If no one else has other questions, I was also looking to apply to the Hertz Foundation as a source of a scholarship for a PhD. So how familiar are you guys with that at all, if at all?
I haven't heard of it before, but I'm Googling it right now.
All right, yeah, I Googled it too, and I was thinking of applying it for my first year. So for reference, I already got into graduate school. I was just wanting to listen in.
I mean, okay, so first of all, does the application require you to pay a fee?
I should know that if I looked it up, right?
Yeah. I
think
mean,
it's
if it doesn't
$100.
cost you anything, I would say go for it. Like, why not? If it doesn't cost you anything, I think you should definitely apply to as many scholarships. That just increases your chances of receiving any type of scholarships, not just from Hertz, but if it's for free, then go for it. Apply to everything that you can find.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Also, and one, congratulations on graduate school, but two, I'm sure you're already familiar with the application process. So I'm sure with letters of rec, if you're applying to like 15 different places, make sure that you're asking the people who are writing those letters of recommendation early, and that they know that they're going to have to like at least change the name on like the letter to 15 different places for you. So they're not surprised, like, okay, I did this one, we're good, right? And you're like, oh, well, there's actually 14 more, like super last minute. So just making sure that everything's taken care of early is definitely better than doing everything last minute. So
is it for free, Harry?
I don't know still. I'm still looking. It doesn't say that it costs anything.
Okay, then I feel like it probably, if it doesn't mention anything about application fees, just go for it.
Okay,
You have nothing to lose,
that's true.
other than maybe a few hours of changing your application documents. But yeah.
Yeah, there's one essay that has no word limit on it, and I don't know how to feel about that.
I mean, you applied for graduate school. Come
Yeah.
on.
So
less is more.
Mm-hmm.
Also, something that I forgot to mention in terms of what I added to my application was my GRE score. So when I was applying to graduate school, I think that was the last year that the GRE was still required, at least for Columbia. And so like I had to take it, but I studied a little bit for it and did well enough that I felt good sending my scores. But I think if you feel like it would add a lot to your application to include your GRE, or to take the GRE and then include the score, now that it's optional for a lot of places, I would recommend actually like taking it seriously and take the test and try and score in like at least I think the 90th percentile, especially if you're going to do something STEM related, in like the upper 90s percentile. It's like pretty much the SAT, and I don't necessarily think it will like be earth-shattering for your application, but I think if they're choosing between you and an identical candidate that doesn't have it, it will definitely show that you're just like one extra little step above, especially if you have been able to score well on the STEM portion. And that doesn't mean get like 30th percentile on the English either. You still have to show proficiency in that. But that was just like one extra layer that I had to my application.
I like to add to that, just because I just recently went through the application process. Most of the people who interviewed with me at schools actually didn't take the GRE, so that's just a conflicting.
Yeah, I mean,
so it can go either way.
Yeah, I'm dating myself a little bit with that.
All right, so do we have any other final questions? I guess not. So we can close off for tonight. So thank you all so much for coming today. We hope that you were able to gain some beneficial information from our panelists, and thank you to our panelists for your amazing advice and insight. We truly appreciate it. So if any of you would like to follow up with our panelists after this event with any questions that you may not have been able to ask, you can always connect with them via LinkedIn or through email. With all that being said, I hope you all enjoy your night and have a great week.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck on finals.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.